Now, this is an important video. This is all about how trading actually works. And it surprises me how many traders don't actually know how trading actually works. And if you've been blowing accounts for years, then this is going to put a stop to it. You're going to understand why you've been losing so much and how to solve it. So it's a really important video, probably one of the most important things you need to get down and understand before you even trade. Once you do, trading changes dramatically. So let's get on with it. So if we imagine here, this is a sequence of trades. And imagine that every tick is a free or a win, and every X is a -1 or a loss. So if we add all these things together, all these trades, it would have been a 44% return. Pretty good. Now, would you have stuck with the strategy after only one win in 9 trades or losing 10 in a row? So let's say you started here, you just lost trade after trade after trade after trade, and then maybe you won one, then you lost again. All right. Most traders would not have stuck with this strategy. And there's some reasons for this. Firstly, mainly because they haven't tested and verified the strategy. So this is why I always bang on about testing it, verifying everything, because it's going to give you confidence in the strategy, especially when you go live. So if you've tested your strategy and you know that this is perfectly normal, this sequence of losses, you're going to be more willing to keep trading through it and come out the other side and get that return. Whereas if you don't know your stats, you've just took a strategy off YouTube, started trading it, and you hit this sequence of losses, you're not going to stick with it, are you? You're going to switch strategies and go to the next one. The other side of things as well is risk management. They don't understand to position size correctly with an edge. And this brings me to the risk of ruin, which is something that's really important to understand in regards to position sizing. So we only want to risk a small amount per trade, like 1%, because that avoids the risk of ruin and it allows the probabilities to play out. Whereas if you're risking 10% per trade, let's say here, so you risk 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, you've blown up within 10 trades. Whereas if you're just risking a small amount, that's just a 10% drawdown, and then eventually you recover. So a large part of it is understanding, what's your win rate, what's the maximum risk you want to be risking so you avoid that risk of ruin. So if you've got a 40% win rate, you don't want to be risking 10% per trade, 5% even. Okay, 1%, you'll be totally fine. Now that's something we'll talk about in some later videos. And there is another reason why traders fail. And it's all about the law of large numbers. So what is the law of large numbers? Well, basically put, there's a random distribution between wins and losses in the short term. But once we get a large sample size, the probabilities, aka law of large numbers, they begin to work. And the best example of the law of large numbers in action is by using a fair coin toss. So when you toss a coin and you see how it lands, you either get heads or tails with an equal probability of 50% each. However, if you toss it just a few times, the outcome is actually totally random. So if you were to flip it 10 times, you would think, oh, it's going to be 5 heads, 5 tails. But the fact is, it's totally random. You could have 9 tails in a row and 1 head, for example. But if you were to flip that coin 100 times, the odds of it being 50% heads, 50% tails becomes much, much closer. And that is exactly how trading works. Okay. In the short term, the results are absolutely random. If you take 10 trades, just like that previous example, that is totally random. But if you take 100 trades, 200 trades, the law of large numbers play out, the probabilities, and you'll be having a positive return. So imagine if you flip this coin 100 times, and every time it lands on heads, you win 2, and every time it lands on tails, you lose 1. You're going to be profitable with that, and that's the same with trading. It's the same concept. Now, what is also important with the law of large numbers and probabilities is position sizing. This is the absolute key. This is your risk management. You have to risk the same amount per trade. It has to be static risk. Now, you might have heard people say, oh, I have a dynamic risk. I risk 5% on this when it's an A plus setup or whatever. That's not how I believe you should be trading. Static risk is how you do it because you have no idea if that trade is going to work or not. It's just 50-50. But we know if we trade an edge like mine, over the long run, we keep risking the same amount per trade, the odds are going to play out and we'll be profitable. So this is an important part of the math. You must make sure that you use the correct position size no matter what, or the law of large numbers, it's just not going to work. If you keep using sporadic bet sizes, Okay, if you're risking 5% on one trade, 2% on another, 10% on another, 0.5 on another, all right, you destroy the magic of the law of large numbers and any edge that you have. The only exception is where maybe you hit a bad drawdown. Okay, you can reduce your risk in half, maybe risk 0.5% instead of a full percent. But again, you must stick to the same amount until you get back to where you are, or the math simply won't work. So what position size you choose is all going to be personal to you. So a good indicator is the amount that allows you to sleep at night. So if you're risking 10% of your account or 50%, you're not going to be able to sleep very well. All right. I'd recommend not risking more than 1% or 2% of your equity, unless if you're just starting out. And again, it's all personal. You might be comfortable risking just 0.5 or a quarter percent. Whatever it is, that's fine, as long as you can sleep at night and trade the system. So something else I want to talk about is gambler's fallacy. So this is a bias that a lot of traders fall into. And it's the mistaken belief that if an event occurred more frequently than expected in the past, it's less likely to occur in the future and vice versa. So for example, if you've lost 9 trades in a row, you think, oh, because I've lost that many trades, the next one has to be a winner. Okay, but the fact is it's still 50-50. You can still lose that trade. And that's what a lot of traders fall into. It's a common trap. So going back to that coin flip, okay, if we flip it 10 times, it's totally random. It's only if we flip it 100 times or more that the large sample size plays out, we see the edge work. So a gambler's fallacy, it's a common bias we need to watch out for. So just because you lost 5 trades in a row doesn't mean the next trade's going to win. See, this is where traders go wrong. Okay, just because you lost 9 trades in a row and they think the next one could win, they risk the whole account on it to make back the losses. And what happens? They blow up. There's no way of knowing. Every trade is individual and there's random distribution between the wins and losses, especially in the short term. So we just have to stick with the system long enough, position size correctly, and the edge will play out. The homework this week is I want you to see the probabilities work. So seeing is believing. So this is going to be really, really powerful. So the first exercise I want you to do is that coin flip exercise. Flip it 100 times and record how many heads and how many tails you get. And it should be very close to 50-50. And that's the law of large numbers playing out. And I want you to observe the short-term randomness as well. Just highlight the short little outcomes of like 10 flips and see just how random they are. But when you stretch them out, that's where the probabilities were. The second exercise that will really help you understand the law of large numbers is simply backtesting the strategy with that static risk, for example, 1% per trade, and do it over a large sample size, at least 100. But realistically, we want to be doing over 500 plus with our markets that I've shared with you. And this way, you're going to see the probabilities working in action with the actual strategy. So if I highlight the result of like 10 trades, see the randomness, and then drag it out and see what the results are after a large sample size. And it should just give you a paradigm shift in your thinking. So just to recap, observe the drawdowns, how random it is in the short term, and notice past the certain losing streaks, if you keep trading the edge with that fixed static position sizing, the probabilities, aka the law of large numbers, they start to play out, and the edge eventually overcomes that drawdown period and goes back into the positive. So it'll be really, really powerful.